Well, it's definitely changed considerably. It's entirely different, and with all the new buildings going up around the other side of the lake there now, it's changing quite a lot more. But my memories of Acton was the early Acton was just the cottages and the places in Liversidge Street and around there, and the old community hospital, the Weatherboard Community Hospital, and the Acton Nursery and places like that. But there was the Institute of Anatomy was there, and Beecham House were the only buildings between Acton and the Civic in them days, and it certainly has certainly not a change. But a lot of the changes have been for the good. A lot of them are better, and some are a bit monstrosities, in my opinion.
I know even my grandchildren say it's progress, but that's a word that you use. Some of it's progress, and I don't think so. And as regards to the lake, please, I don't like the lake. I know everybody's against me. My sister jumps on me every time. But where I grew up, under the old Commonwealth Bridge, we had hockey fields and cricket fields and all that. The new Commonwealth Bridge is a beautiful bridge and what have you. But what they did to all the ground round Acton, where the houses were, and all that, it was beautiful, wide open placing. And the lake, it's as cold as charity. To me, the lake. And I quite agree with the lady that said they're knocking down too much of what we would call heritage. Like today I said to the taxi driver, I'm going to Canberra House. And I said, you know where that is? I know, it's at Acton. Where do I finish up in Civic? At Canberra House? That's officers. This is Canberra House.
It's old.
It doesn't matter whether it's heritage. And if I might be so bold to say what they've extended under Canberra House, I think it's cruel. That's not all I could say, but I will close now. Sheila said.
You said it all. You said it all.
Now you've got to say your piece. What do you?
No, I think the lake was a big improvement because all that area flooded anyhow, and I think it's come. That's better than having it flood every now and again and causing all the problems. It was, I think, an ideal. It's beautiful to drive past the lake at night, Jane, and all the lights are on.
It's man-made.
It is.
It's all become a commercialised area, and I don't know that people come here like they used to. It's a workplace, mostly. Apart from the museum, of course, brings the visitors. But all the lake shore, you don't have the same access to it anymore. And the old hospital was in a beautiful spot. It was magic. So that's gone. But it's still a very pretty area. But it's just changed in character, I think.
The lake has improved Canberra. It's turned it into the city that it is, and is creating recreation, and it's still a beautiful area. It's the Valley of Canberra.
I think I liked it before the lake.
Did you?
Yeah.
I can't really remember. I honestly can't remember it.
She's a lot younger than me.
Yeah. So, you know, I just love... I think the lake's lovely. But Canberra's way too big now. Yeah, it was much better when I was a kid.
With the lake and that, it has made it nice, but I can still remember going down to the river and being down the river and playing hockey where the hockey fields were under the river, under the lake now, and the golf course that was there. Yeah, I can remember all that. But we're lucky our families always look forward to the future. They've never sort of dwelled on the past too much, have they?
No. But they always like to go back and look around this area. and think, oh yes, that's where we used to play, and or up on these hills, and the houses were down there, and so I suppose it sort of upset them a bit.
Yeah, I don't know. No.
Yeah.
I think it's sad. It's to have grown up there. Some other time. I get teary. How's it changed, Margie?
To me, it's just different. I couldn't believe when we went round there. It's just not. It's not Acton at all. The buildings and cars. It's just not Acton anymore.
But very vivid memories of Canberra, of Acton. I think it was sad to see it go, and it went so unceremoniously. The cottages just seem to be occupied today, empty tomorrow. And I think the sad thing is that there doesn't appear to be a lot of photographic records of the cottage line, for example. It was home for so many families, so much activity.
The lake, it is beautiful, but I do miss the flow of that river. I really do. Just something about it. I guess it was there since I was a little girl. And I think that, I suppose Westlake had to go, and maybe Acton had to go, but it's a bit sad that there's not even a cottage that they didn't renovate. What if they put a cottage up here and kept one of them and renovated it, as it used to be? A bit like it's a Blundell's cottage. I think they do the same thing. I would have loved to have seen something like that.
I used to work at CSIRO, and we'd go for a walk at lunchtime, and we'd come along the recreation path down to around here, and I'd say to the people I was walking with, my grandparents used to live there. They did not have a clue. Really, they'd say? There were houses here, and I'd say yes, there was a whole community there. They couldn't believe it. So we need to keep that history.
I don't know.
Progress,
history,
isn't it?
Progress.
But you lose a lot of the history.
Well, I've said before that we made an error not getting our parents to give us more information, tell us more, record more.
But your mother and father were very secretive.
Yeah.
Your mother told me just before she died that she'd never seen your father naked. And I thought they were married, I don't know, 50 or 55 years or something. And she was dying, and she told me this in the hospital, and I thought, that's strange.
Yeah.
You live with this man for all these years.
Well, I haven't seen you naked.
Oh, bullshit.
We farmed on the island until 1962, and by that stage they were starting to excavate for the lake because they did remove a lot of trees. They removed a lot of topsoil which was taken away, and that was put from the river, and that was put in an area and then later utilised around Canberra. So in 1962, when the excavation started, we had our clearing sale and moved out. So I was 17. I mean, we were young and life was going to go ahead, and you tend not to be looking back. My dad, I think he just saw it as the end of a lot of hard work, but I don't really know how he felt inside. It never occurred to me to ask him. I wish I had, but there we are. It had to happen because you couldn't have a national capital with river flats and a few cows and a few crops. It just wouldn't have brought the whole thing together. And we always knew, from when I was very small, we always knew there was going to be a lake, although my dad always used to say, not in my time. However, it was in his time. And I think it's done a lot for Canberra, and it's given a very large recreational area for an increasingly large population. So yes, I think it's good. Last year in April, it was 50 years since the family left the farm, so we cut our ties completely. And I thought it would be nice to try and have a bit of a reunion and go back to the island and just have a look about. So we arranged with some cousins and my family to go across to the island on the ferry, and we had a lovely morning. Well, the weather was poor, but it was a lovely morning. We had morning tea on the island. There's very little there now except a public toilet, which is almost where my house used to be, which is an awful claim to fame. But there's only the one tree there that I can recognise now, which was there when we were there.
I thought it was sad initially, but now, and we're only saying even the other night when we were there, it really has added to Canberra. But at the time we didn't think that. We thought, oh look, the Molonglo was such a pretty little river and so many good picnic spots everywhere, and couldn't envisage the big plan of the lake.
There's been so many changes. It's not like a normal town. We grew up in Acton where there were vacant paddocks, and you used to drive to Civic without seeing a house, you know, just about the word Beecham House and Acton Hotel, and that was it. Oh, the Institute of Anatomy was there. But now there's been so much change that it's hard to, you've got to look past these new places to get to the old parts you knew and brought up with. Whereas if you lived in any other normal town in Australia, there'd be changes, but not as drastic as or as much as Acton suffered. You know, but the ANU just wasn't there when we were. There was nothing there. You know, there was John Curtin School of Medicine was one of the first buildings, I think. But anyway, so everything's changed, and the lake, of course, destroyed, put underwater. Many good memories. All those Acton flats and the race course and the golf course. 3 major parts of Canberra, really, just underwater.
I've lived in Canberra all my life, and I don't know, I hardly lived anywhere else, so I don't really know anything else, but I think Canberra's too big now. I'd rather it was back in the 80s or do, the 50s. Oh no, not 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. They're the times I liked best when I was growing up, I suppose. It's far too big now. And Acton's, I'd rather old Acton House was still back on the peninsula instead of the hospital or the museum.
Oh, well, when the lake came in, that was one thing, but I'm not really very comfortable with the development of Canberra. And of course, because I worked all my professional life at Royal Canberra Hospital, when they decided to dynamite it and knock it down, I really haven't enjoyed the peninsula much ever since. I think it was an unnecessary. It was unnecessary. It's politically motivated, and I shouldn't be saying this, I suppose. But it was politically motivated because they were trying to develop Calvary because, for a variety of reasons, some of them religious and some of them political. They thought if Canberra Hospital went, Royal Canberra went, that there'd be stimulus for Calvary. It wasn't, didn't work. Anyway, I don't like the building that's there now, and I never will. But there you are.
I quite like the museum, but I've never been able to understand why they chose that site to build something that is essentially inward looking on a site where it ought to be outward looking. However, you know, I don't want to go on about the museum. It's great and I like it, but I'd like them to do something about the real history of that area. But the lake really, it brought Canberra together. There's no question about that. And I still ride my bike around the whole of the lake fairly regularly and just admire the place so much that I couldn't think of living anywhere else.
I would have preferred it to stay as it was, with the old hospital where it was, and they should have, I don't know, they should have renovated the buildings and left them here. They destroyed most of them. There's not many of them left now. And I think they should have been part of the heritage of the area. But they just destroyed them and built new buildings, awful-looking buildings, some of them are horrible. I wouldn't even supervise them if I was given the job.
I loved it the way it was. I must admit, it was pretty. You know, I used to go fishing down the Mononglow River. I used to catch just down here little turtles and sell them to the pet shop in Kingston for 20 cents each, or two shillings each in those days. It was very pretty, but I think that obviously progress is progress.
It's very different because the focus is very different from what it was then, really. You know, with the museum being there and not the hospital anymore. And there was a lot of buildings that are now non-existent here. You know, not that I remember them, but you know, having looked at the maps, you know, the police station and Department of Interior, I'm sure that building went long ago. Well, I know it would have, because it ended up as hospital buildings in that area. I think it's very vibrant. There's some really lovely buildings here, and I really enjoy the fact that some of the core buildings are still here. Some of the really lovely old university wooden houses, I've noticed, are still there. I don't know what they're used for now, but they're still there, and I was really pleased to see that. So they've retained some of the really lovely old places and reallocated them to other reasons, other purposes, I should say. But in general, I think the lake made the Canberra. It was sad in some ways that we lost a lot of, you know, things, but I think we gained more in the long run.
It went from a little country town with a lovely river running through it to this city with a lake and two big bridges. It's not a little country town anymore. We used to go to Kingston or Civic and we would know everybody. You'd be away for hours talking to people. You go to town now, you don't know anybody. Yeah, it's all changed. That was one of the things I noticed the change mostly, was how the people quickly came in.
Oh, it's changed so completely. I think one has to be honest. In the early days of Canberra, and even in 42, it was struggling. People coming for a short time and working and leaving, especially as the war finished in the late 40s. And then there was such a different change when there were so many migrants came. And there was almost like a light storm that had brought in a lot of new people. So there was a lot of new people to get to know.
Frankly, because I'm 90 years old, and I came here, when I was 21, 20, I had my 21st year. 21st was the big thing, 21st. And so lately I've thought, in a way, because I'm partly disabled, you might call it, I feel that I'm in another area. This is all another world around me.
The whole thing's magnificent, really. I mean, what we had was a ridiculous creek. You know, ridiculous creeks are not so satisfactory, and even if you can get a yabby or something. The whole place has definitely an upgrade. There's no doubt whatsoever about that.
Before, when we just had the river go through, whilst it was a nice country town, that was basically what it was, and as one person very insultingly described it as a good sheep paddock being spoilt, and that was basically what it is. The Mononglow River was very nice and so on, but it just had a very country town atmosphere. As soon as the lake came in, the whole concept of the city and everything else completely changed, and we knew that it was now going to become a capital city, which it has done, which is well and truly well renowned now for. But the lake has been an absolute integral part of the forming of the city.
Well, entirely different transformation. Yeah. Different site for a city altogether. Yeah, the other place was a good site for a dairy farm, you know, when the Molonglo River ran through there. But with the lake, it's just transformed the area. And the grand plan, all the Burley Griffins plan, you suddenly see what he was on about.
I loved the lake. I've loved it ever since I've come here. I was here. I was working here when it was filled, and I think it's a natural part. It's part of Burley Griffin's plans, and I don't have any problem with it whatsoever. We have lost a bit of heritage around Acton. We lost a bit of heritage around Kingston as well. They were all my stomping grounds when I was young, but yeah. But no, Canberra benefits from it.
I think the lake has been the making of Canberra. Actually, I think it's. I think the lake is a bit underused. I think it's still a bit too much of an ornamental pond, and it should have more activity on it. But I think it has definitely turned Canberra from being just an ordinary town into a beautiful city, basically.
Well, we were always told there's going to be a lake there. We were always told there's going to be a permanent Parliament House. We never thought we'd see it, but we have seen both. The lake is good. Lake's good. And it's, I think it's combined Canberra, because normally there was North Canberra and South Canberra. Do you live on the south side? Oh, never meet with those on the north, but we did, and now it's good.
I worked for the National Capital Development Commission from 1958 to 1967, and that was the 9 years when Canberra was changed from from the bush capital to a real national capital and a city of world renown. And I must say that I think the lake was instrumental in sort of bringing the city together. And before, there was a very significant divide between the north and south side. You know, you either lived in the south side and never moved, or you lived in the north side and never moved from the north side. And they were two sort of separate. And the Molonglo, the floodplain of the Molonglo, was a very significant geographical divide. And there were, so there was only the old Commonwealth Avenue Bridge and the two low-level crossings. Often you'd get cut off by floods, and there was lots of farms and that in the Molonglo Valley. So it was very much a geographical divide. And the lake, Lake Burley Griffin, was just amazingly brought it all together, and with the two new bridges, Kings Avenue and Commonwealth Avenue Bridge, the National Library and Anzac Parade and the two portal buildings that all happened in the sort of first 5 years of the 60s, they just dramatically changed the city into a brilliant national capital and city of world renown. So I like the lake. But I might be biased, as I said.
Canberra being only 8,000 or 9,000 people when I was born, half my friends were North Siders, and I can name several that lived in the Acton area. But then later on, going to school, particularly Canberra High School, whether by bus or by bike, one became very familiar with Acton being the engine room of Canberra. It was a very significant place, full of interest. The whole Acton area was full of excitement and interest. You knew it was the most important part of Canberra. Another part of my life happens to be Parliament House, but that was Parliament House. Acton was more the civil society, and it had so many manifestations of civil society and sport and public health and administration, banking. The lake, of course, we always expected and wanted the lake to happen. But one has to say, here and now, that there is a great tension at work, an historic tension around Acton. And now on the statute book we have the so-called Griffin legacy, which is allowing the development, Darling Harbour style, of West Basin. And the plan is there for commentary, for implementation, for systems that might go to work as to whether it ever happens and how it might happen. So there's great potential for change and great tension between Griffin's vision and, I should add, the NCDC's vision for West Basin, because in these respects they upheld Griffin, they varied it. Even the shape of the lake was a partial departure from Griffin, but many principles and precedents were well established by the Griffin Plan and by the NCDC, which now have been converted to a different blueprint altogether. So this is the state of tension for me that is around West Basin at the moment.
Well, for us, living in Canberra's a lovely place to live now. In the 12 years that we were away, it changed a lot, and I think it's a city that now is a city. It's got a lot more character, it's got a lot more soul, it's got a lot more culture, it's got many, many more things to see and do. And living in this area here, for example, it's there are always things happening and places to go to eat and so on. So it's changed a lot. We're living in 19 Marcus Clark Street, which is called The Apartments, which is, it gets its name from the fact that it's a block of apartments, but also has a lot of artwork around and in the apartment. So it's a play on words in a sense, because the art is in the middle, apartments, with nice artwork in the foyers and little statues out on the roof garden, and a big peacock in the foyer. But it's part of a precinct which is also developing in the same way. A lot of artworks around the precinct, which you have to hand it to the developers. They've done more than just build the building. The building is New Acton South, actually, but New Acton's the precinct, and we refer to it as that, yeah. We're told by the post office that we're in Canberra City, actually, but we still like to put on our envelopes Acton, and they still find us.